All right, something a little bit different for the Wednesday news video. Of course, the big news this week, in case you missed it, is EA's big buyout. Yes, according to these news reports, EA is selling to private equity or private investors to the tune of $55 billion. If finalized, is essentially a record for this style of transaction. And it's a confusing one. It's not public where like Xbox and Microsoft would buy Activision Blizzard. It's a bit more complicated. It doesn't seem good, but there is a lot to it. Of course, from the investment firms buying into this, there are geopolitical and social ramifications, but I could barely even grasp from a business sense and a math sense and all that what this even is, what this even means. What does it mean when private equity gobbles up a massive gaming publisher? Why did they do it? How long is it going to take? What actually happens? What happens to game studios? What happens to employees? And what happens to the games we're looking forward to playing? I kind of wanted to get into the nitty gritty of some of this, so I went literally to the belly of the beast. And by that, I spoke to a lawyer who focuses on private equity transactions. I've seen the good takes, the bad takes, but I just needed the transaction explained to me like I was 5. So I went to Taylor Bartholomew, a partner at Troutman Pepper Locke. Like I said, he literally specializes in the room like these types of things, but also he's a longtime personal friend. I knew him from high school. We used to play video games together. So I thought it was a good time to bring him in. It's an interesting conversation. Yes, it gets into the weeds a little bit, but if you're like me, you don't know anything, you might come out the other side, at least understanding how this goes down and what we can see in the future with this, what we can expect somewhat. Okay, and kick off to it. Taylor, hey, what's up, man? Thanks for coming to talk to me and explain this shit to me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
It's interesting. I've mentioned you in podcasts or videos somewhere. I want to like everyone to know just up front, you're the guy who exposed me to Demon Souls. You, in my mind, are the guy who discovered Demon Souls. I always tell the story. I'm like, yeah, when I was in high school, this kid was like, dude, you got to check out this game. And you showed it to me and you died right in the beginning, like with the bridge with the dragon. And I was like, this sucks. This game's not going to go anywhere. And you were right all along. Who would have thought?
There you go. I called it early.
Did you expect the franchise to go as far as it did?
No, because it was hard. It's a hard game. It's really frustrating, right? Like many smashed controllers. I mean, I tried to do New Game Plus on Demon Souls remake, and I'm just like, I don't have the patience for this. I'm too old for this.
Right, things change. It's crazy. Look at us now here talking about business stuff. I definitely wanted to drill into this, but top level, kind of like explain it to me like a baby. What is this?
What is this? So it's a good question. So let's take a step back for a second. So private equity, right? Private equity in gaming, private equity in anything. What is private equity? So there are things that you may have heard, right? Called private equity firms. So a private equity firm is a manager, right, of other people's and entities' money. Okay, so it's like an asset manager. Okay, a private equity fund is a pool of money raised by a private equity firm. That pool of money is deployed to buy an asset, right? So like super easy terms. Let's use an analogy, for example. You buy a house. What do you do when you buy a house? You show up with a down payment, right? You show up with a down payment, and what do you do with the rest? You borrow, right? You go to a bank. You get a mortgage. The bank takes out the asset, the house, right, is collateral for that loan. And you've now put a down payment in and you own the house after the fact, right? This is a leveraged buyout. That's what this is. So EA is going through a leveraged buyout. The private equity firms involved, Silver Lake, okay, that's American. You have Affinity, that's another American one. And then you have an entity called PIF, Public Investment Fund. Mm-hmm. That is Saudi-backed. It's a Saudi Arabian sovereign wealth fund, which is essentially a fund that is backed by a government. Okay, they're taking their money, they're pooling it, okay, and they're buying the public shares of Electronic Arts. So Electronic Arts is a public company. The shares are publicly traded. And we can get into what that means. But this leveraged buyout is essentially these 3 entities pooling money, borrowing, using a big check, right, borrowing a bunch of money to buy the shares from the public stockholders. Okay, that's a leveraged buyout. A leveraged buyout, the leveraged part, is it's the debt. Right, it's the part of the house that you're buying using the bank funds. Okay, let's talk for a second about what leverage is, right? Why would you want to use leverage? So,
Yeah.
is it okay? Can I ask you to do some math in this
Oh,
segment?
jeez. Okay, I could try. Yeah.
Very basic. Okay. We're going to do some return calculations. All right. And I'm a lawyer, so I don't like math either, for the record.
Okay, good.
So let's assume you're in the market for a pizzeria, right?
Excellent.
Because you're constantly writing checks you can't cash, right? Like how many slices of pizza have you been offering folks over the years? So you've identified the best pizzeria on Long Island. It's $1 million, right? You have
Okay.
$1 million in cash. You buy that, you hold it, you sell it, right? In 5 years, you get 1.1 million because you're not very good at managing the pizzeria for some reason. You've only appreciated the value a little bit, right? You get 1.1 million. What is your return percentage wise?
Is that 10%?
10%. Awesome.
All right.
Part one done.
Oh,
All right.
I'm so nervous.
Let's try. You didn't even break out the pen or paper. It's fantastic. Let's try with leverage. Okay. Same pizzeria. All right. You only have $200,000. Okay. That's your down payment.
Mhm.
It's $200,000. You find a bank. They, for some reason, give you $800,000 because they're like, this man has promised the world pizza. I believe in it. Let's do it. Right. $1 million. So you get 800,000 from the bank, 200,000 from you. You buy the company, same hypo. You sell it for 1.1 million. What's your return?
Well, yeah, the return would be you would profit 100,000, but you would have to subtract what you borrowed, correct?
Well, you pay it back, right?
Yeah.
You pay back the debt, and then you now get $100,000 in addition to your original 200,000 back. So what's your return?
300?
Well, your return would be 100, so it's 50%.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Duh. Okay, got it.
So like using math, we've demonstrated why people do leverage buyouts, right? Because your returns can be heightened. All right. A private equity fund exists, private equity firm exists to make money for its investors, who are called limited partners. Okay. And you're probably thinking, okay, isn't that sort of similar to public stockholders, right? Like a public company like EA has public stockholders.
Yeah, like generating value for shareholders.
Exactly. So the mandate still applies, right? So the goal of a corporation, right, or generally any business entity, it's a broad statement, but the goal of any business entity is to generate the maximum amount of profit for the stockholders, right, the equity holders.
Mm-hmm.
That is true whether it's a public company like EA or if it's a private company that's private equity backed. The goal is always to generate money, right, maximum value. Now, the difference between a public company like EA, which technically the mandate is let's establish long-term value. The difference is a private equity fund is like a house flipper, right? They come in for a time horizon, let's call it usually 5 to 7 years. They'll hold the asset for 5 to 7 years. And the goal is to make the asset, right, the company, appreciate in value and then sell it for a return using the same math that you and I just did with the pizzeria. Okay. So the whole thing is for whatever their time horizon may be, they need to make the value of that thing skyrocket so they can sell, which is what is called in the industry an exit. They can sell and get a return, right, on their money.
Mm-hmm. So why, from EA's standpoint, why would EA want to engage in this? So
EA would want to engage in this because this is, first of all, the largest ever private equity buyout, I believe, in history. Just not in just gaming, in history, right? So it's big news across the industry in general.
Crazy.
EA wants to do it because its board is mandated by law to maximize value for the stockholders. So if this private equity group, right, let's call it a group, the fancy word is consortium because it's 3 different entities coming together to club and then make a bid. The reason why is because it's a huge premium to the stock price, right? So the board says, oh, okay, well, our stock price is 100, but I'm just making this up, right? I don't know exactly what the stock price is, but the premium is like 25%. So it's basically on any given day, it's 100. They came in and said, okay, $125, right? Offer you can't refuse in Godfather terms, right? So they're saying, we think this is the best value reasonably available, and it makes sense to sell at this time. Stockholders, please approve this deal.
Okay, wow. So it's not essentially like they want to be juiced to make more video games or make better video games or anything. It's more about the shareholder value stuff, correct?
Correct. It's stockholder value at the end of the day. That's always what it is. And, again, whether public or private, these video game companies, they're making games to be profitable, right? So you may have these like Baldur's Gate 3 devs going out being like, hey, video games are great. We want to be great and make all these great video games. And that's why we exist. But unless you're like a nonprofit or like a public benefit corporation or something like that, the mandate is to maximize stockholder value, right? So everyone's trying to make money. Now, I'm really hoping we're not going to see post-closing, fingers crossed, right? Battlefront 3, oops, more loot boxes, right? But I do expect to see them trying to get serious value out of this thing, right? Whatever that means.
Yeah, which that's what I wanted to kind of go into, because there's lots of conversation around EA essentially being on the hook for some of this and how they're going to need to be essentially the people buying them or the buyout are going to essentially have to crack the whip for EA to generate money to kind of earn back something, right?
It's possible. It's possible, right? So it's hard to make general statements about it, but there are private equity firms, and it's more complicated because there's multiple involved here, right? But there are private equity firms that say, okay, I'm going to be passive. I bought it because I think it's a great asset and I love what management's doing currently. Go ahead, release Battlefield 6. It's going to do gangbusters numbers. They're going to get, what do they say, like 10 million or
something,
what was it?
Crazy,
100 million?
Crazy,
yeah, some like crazy concurrent player count, right? We're going to do that. We think that's great. And then in 5 years, that alone and everything else we have in the hopper, we're going to ride it out and it's going to be great, right? We're betting against the market that it's undervalued right now, right? That's one approach, passive. The other approach is active, right? They get in the operations, they get in the mix, and they say, hey, you guys are doing this all wrong. We do need those loot boxes. We need, gacha games. We need to partner with, all these other firms out there and extract the most, because we only have, remember, that time horizon. We don't want to hold this thing for 20 years. We want to hold it for 5 to 7 years to sell it so that I can return money back to the investors, right? Because that's our mandate as the private equity fund.
So if that is essentially to pretty up the goose, to fatten the goose, to sell it, is there a pattern in your experience of essentially downsizing, cutting costs, laying off people, or like in EA's case, like do you think that there's a possibility of like studio closures? Like, are they going to target the smaller underperforming studios? And is it all gloom and doom essentially?
I don't think it's all gloom and doom. I mean, I think it just depends on the firm, right? Some will say, oh, I have a completely different vision. I disagree with how they're doing it. And that's going to involve closing, all these different studios to get to that end, right? And we're going to completely pivot, right? And sometimes it does involve a drastic reduction in headcount. Sometimes it does. Especially in a public company like Electronic Arts, it's entirely possible, right? Because public companies are sort of the flip side of private-backed companies in that there's just tons of people that are on the payroll, because sometimes you need those people to, maintain a public company, because a public company is, by its nature, it's transparent. You have to make filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission. There are more laws that apply to you, right? So it's a bigger organization. It's a bigger machine. So when you take something private, which is what's happening right now, it won't be a public company anymore. The shares will be held by these 3 different firms. The idea is it will be able to do more, be more flexible, and it will be able to not do it in the dark necessarily, but it probably won't require the same headcount, just as a practical matter. But who knows, right? Who knows what they could be passive. They could be one of those.
I've seen examples on the negative side of these types of things, like Toys R Us. People are quick to point out Toys R Us was essentially stripped for parts. So we've talked about the negative, but like, can you think off the top of your head of like a positive example of something that gamers can understand, a company that they can understand that was in private equity and it worked out?
I was actually thinking about that earlier. Maybe Lululemon would be a good example. I think that's PE backed. I think it's doing well. I think it was a turnaround story, right? So I think while the Toys R Us examples are out there for sure, there's probably an equal amount of successes, right? I think that the problem is that people get the headline, oh, like vulture capital, they come in, they strip it for parts, right? As you said. And I think that's a bit of a misconception, because like, just put aside however anyone feels about private equity, like from a legal perspective, and man, this is like the most boring thing ever, right? I'm sorry. So like, the way that it works is when you sell a company, you have to pay off the debt first, right? So in a mortgage, you pay the bank, right?
Yeah.
In our leverage buyout example, you pay the bank or whoever lent you the money, right? So like, think about it. If I spent 5 to 7 years building a company and it's shitty, and then I sell it because I didn't do a good job with managing it, whether because I was passive or active, right? There's no stripping occurring. It's the bank or whatever the lender is saying, oh, you didn't turn it around. You didn't get a return. I need to recoup my investment, my loan, right? And I need to sell this company because it's not a success, right? And in that situation, what happens? The private equity firm and the fund doesn't get anything because the debt is ahead of it, right? So there is no incentive for a private equity firm, to be clear, to come in here and say, I'm just going to sit back and then just siphon assets out of this thing, right? That's not how it works, because the lender will say, what are you doing? And the lender has a whole set of protections to make sure that doesn't happen. Because remember, just like the house, right? The company is the collateral. So the lender doesn't want the private equity firm sort of commingling and diverting assets and doing all these shady things. So I think that's one big misconception I usually see. And I push back against that, not necessarily on public forums, because it's tough to debate the internet on it, right? But that's the fact of the matter is, like, the incentive remains the same. It's profit maximization, and everyone wants the thing to be a success. It's just that sometimes that's like, what's the concept on like Reddit, right? It's like a shitification or something, I think is the term.
Yeah, that's the word. Yeah.
So that usually coincides, right? Because sometimes private equity firms come in and they're like, why are you doing this thing? It may be great for the consumers and they love that, but it's costing us like an incredible amount of money. Don't do that, do this. And then the public facing component is, they're completely changing the game, right? Costco's not selling the rotisserie chicken anymore, right? That's a bad example, because of course they are, but that would be the equivalent, I would think.
One thing I was curious, because this is private, so it's different, but are we going to see any sort of like scrutinization or dragged out process like we did with public things like Activision Blizzard and Microsoft? Or
I mean, an acquisition of that size is going to be subject to regulatory approval in the US. I mean, for one thing, just again, take a step back. You have the Saudi Arabian Sovereign Fund, PIF, putting all this money into an American company, Electronic Arts. So there would be governmental approvals with that, because someone is going to say, is that okay? Right now, they own a small minority stake right now in that company. So there's a bunch of nuance that goes into that, but they're enhancing their stake from something, I think it was like 5%.
5 or 10.
All the way.
I think it might have been
It was
10.
like, 5 to 10. They're going all the way up to a majority. I think they're going to control this thing. So you've essentially transformed an American company that's public to a Saudi-controlled like enterprise that's operating in the U.S. And like, not to say anything political about it, but like that does involve some additional regulatory scrutiny. So I think you're going to see that. It would require antitrust approval as well, right? Because it's way over the threshold for getting those types of things reviewed. So I think, I don't know how much political action you'll see on it, because it's Electronic Arts and not like Boeing or something, but it is, it would involve some time. It's going to take some time to get that pushed through.
Super broad ballpark just for players out there to expect how long this will take? And also, if it is not an offhanded approach, how long until we actually see some of the ramifications or some of the touches that they're going to implement?
So I think if I could check the agreement, I can tell you how long they're probably thinking it'll take. My guess is it's probably in a period of like a year, if not more, just because of how much approval time is needed. And then in terms of when you're going to feel that stuff, I think you tell me, right? Like, what does a gaming pipeline look like? You have to develop the game, you have to put the money into the game, you have to test the game, you have to release the game. I think it'll be several years before you feel anything, unless they get in there and they're like, we're canceling everything, straight to the loot box idea. Yeah. Right. I'll take credit for that. But yeah, that's
okay. Good to know. So, okay. The other thing you mentioned before, this like $50 bajillion, this move made waves in your industry, not just the gaming industry. So in your neck of the woods, when you guys are chatting over your cognac by the fireplace, whatever lawyer guys do, I don't know. Is this
mostly just yell we just yell at each other, right?
I like that. That's way better. That's good.
Things
So
like
is this to you guys? Is a general consensus? Is this risky in terms of you even being aware as a gamer, like aware of EA? Is this like a risky play by these private, private ventures?
I don't think it's risky. I think it's a different value proposition, right? Because like when it's a public company, they're trying to accomplish the same thing. There's just no exit in mind. I think the difference will be, oh, we actually have a limited amount of time to exit and make some money off this thing. So I think that's where you'll see the difference because there's an actual time period where things need to happen, you know? So I think maybe you'll see that a little more concentrated than a public company where where management's just saying, it's been a great quarter, stock price is up, let's keep the stock price up and let it keep going up. It's a bit of a different thing, even though it's to the same end.
Okay. All right, cool. So this type of thing, this type of transaction, do you expect more of this in the future in the gaming world? Like, because we talk a lot about the writing on the wall with gaming and how it's so profitable and things are great, but then other areas they're completely struggling. It's so weird. So are we going to see more stuff like this?
You absolutely will. And I think the interesting thing is, since, as I mentioned, it's the largest private equity buyout, I think, of all time, I think this will catch people's attention even more so. And then you're going to have private equity firms from up top, like Silver Lake, Great Affinity, and you're going to see that trickle down to some private equity firms that are differently positioned, like, down market, meaning the purchase price will be a lot less. It won't be 58 billion or whatever it is right now. It'll be 100 million or 50 million, and smaller studios will change hands, right? So I think you'll see a lot more M&A activity in the gaming industry in general. And I think, maybe it's the next hot industry.
Yeah. Anything else you want to hit on?
I think I've bored your audience enough, probably.
No, I think you totally covered it. I think I have a better idea of what the hell is going on. It is technically not the most thrilling thing from a player standpoint. My concern is always just like, our studios being closed and are games that I want to play still going to be made? And that doesn't seem too clear yet. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. Would you be interested in coming on and talking more about this type of boring stuff and making it a little more interesting and digestible? You down?
Absolutely. As long as, you're willing to have me, happy to come on, and, hopefully more exciting for me next time, because, this stuff is, I'm saying it and it is so dry.
No. What's your favorite EA game?
I don't know what my favorite one is, but I really like the Battlefield 6 beta. That's been a lot of fun.
Okay, yeah.
Very, very excited to get back on there. And then Battlefront 2, like, post all the patches.
Oh, it's
incredible
so good.
Experience. So
it's
good.
like Star Wars Simulator now. That's all it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I installed it like the other week and I started playing it. I'm like, I can't do these drugs again. Like, I need to delete this immediately because I'm just going to be staying down here forever. But yeah, candidly, every time you guys talk about like any kind of like M&A stuff or private equity stuff, I'm like, please. So yeah, I'd be happy to.
All right, good. Thanks, man.
Of course.
All right, so there you have it. Sometimes it's also just good to talk to a longtime friend you haven't talked to in a while, but also it helps when he explains basic concepts to me like I am an idiot. Because I am. So Taylor, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. But also, I want to hear from you guys in the comments what you think about this whole thing. Like I said, we really just dived into the transaction. We didn't go into all of like what bad could possibly happen. We didn't talk about like the Jared Kushner or Saudi Arabia stuff specifically, which is a whole other can of worms. I want to know what you're thinking now with this. With EA, I know oftentimes we don't expect a lot. So where are you guys at with this one? Let me know in the comments what you think. And if you like this video, I definitely would like to hear some feedback and stuff, because this channel doesn't do a lot of interviews or conversations, but occasionally when I talk about something that involves law or transactional stuff, Taylor texts me and says, dude, you don't have any idea what you're talking about. Shut up. So maybe it's good to have him on sometimes. Either way, let me know what you think about this EA stuff. If you want to read up on it, it'll be linked in the description down below. But that's what I got for you today. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. If you get what I'm trying to do, I usually talk about stuff I like, stuff I find interesting, and this is interesting. But yeah, either way, clicking a like button helps me. Thank you. And other than that, just thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. I'm Jake Baldino. Subscribe because video games, pizza's on me. See ya.